Sweet. So, Brian, I will say I tried to. This was not intentional to make you feel at home. When I left for work today, my wife told me with this shirt, it's new, that I looked like a spa manager. It was such a good burn. Uh, we watched the last season. I know, obviously, you're in Thailand right now. We watched season 3 of White Lotus, which I'm sure you've talked about and heard about. And there was a specific character, the manager there.
Yeah.
She called me. It's just like, do you have any idea I'm talking to a guy that is in Thailand in like an hour and a half?
Well, I guess the good news is your wife's not picking out your clothes for you, so that's
No, I can do it all by myself. I committed to 3 of these unusual poloed shirts. Mitchell has one, so I kind of picked his style. It was not a good start from the wife's perspective, though. So I have to know, obviously, like you don't have to show the whole place again. You're at an incredible suite. How's Thailand?
it is amazing. The food's amazing. I could do without the traffic. I went about 2 miles today and was in a cab for about an hour, but culture's amazing, and have just been seeing a lot of the sites, and it's really up there in the contemporary, modern, not what I had honestly expected. Pleasantly surprised.
Like a very much a first world feel in Bangkok.
Oh, yeah, it's just Louis Vuitton and Chanel on every corner. So crazy
I gotta
about it.
ask about the driving. I was in China a handful of years ago, and the multi-lane merging on highways, like it was actually terrifying. Is it like that there?
Yeah, I just had to take some video on a walking bridge where all the motorcycles go between the cars, and they all just ramp up, and it looks like the starting blocks at the Indy 500 with the motorcycle, but they all just merge and go, and it looks like just a giant centipede, and everybody loses their mind once they get in a car. And I don't know how it works, but it somehow works. So
Yeah, that probably changes your viewpoint on Indianapolis rush hour a little bit.
yeah, literally, we were in the cab for about an hour and 20 minutes for 2 miles, and I probably could have walked it in 45.
Unbelievable.
So,
Are you sticking around in Bangkok, or are you bouncing around anywhere else?
we're bouncing around a little bit. The home base is Bangkok, but we're going to the bridge on the River Kwai on Saturday. Big historical World War II, where the U.S. tried to take out the bridge and the Death Railroad, and we'll go visit a elephant sanctuary and things on Saturday. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah, just trying to drink it all in, and hell, there's just never enough time.
Are you and the wife gonna get to ride an elephant, or you just get to look?
Actually, you go in and you swim with them, and you bathe them, and you get the brush, and you go ahead and clean them and everything. So
Well,
yeah,
maybe you'll
uh,
make yourself a new friend.
yeah. Hopefully, I'm not smashed or stomped on at the same.
Oh, that's like every day we leave the house, the hope. Uh,
Yeah.
are you an adventurous food guy? Like, do you like to eat the authentic stuff, or is it spooky?
No, we've already eaten some pretty funky stuff, and some grilled crickets, and half embryoed eggs, and all kinds of stuff. Not a big spice guy, but so here they like.
That was the only part of going to China that I loved, is eating the wild food. And like the spice thing, when I hit 40, my body decided, like, I don't think that you like this anymore, fella.
Yeah. I'm wondering when I need to break out the erythromycin.
Just keep it stocked.
Yeah.
So today, I think the obvious thing that I want to talk about, obviously, you're in Thailand, just vacationing, not fleeing. I want to talk about examples of you or your people chasing, following, finding people that flee, whether it's a personal business, people trying to get out of there. How big of a thing is that? I know half of like action adventure movies are generally person is wanted, person leaves the state or the country, and then the adventure ensues. How much of the investigation world is centered around go find this person?
Yeah. It seems to be getting more and more as the world shrinks, and the conveniences. This was probably 2 years ago, but had an attorney call me and said, "Hey, this is actually for me. I went on a date with a Brazilian and never saw her again, and got a call 4 years later saying, 'Would you like to speak to your daughter?'" He didn't believe it at first, but found out it was his daughter for the one night stand, and then started to get involved in the child's life. And she didn't like it. There was a lot of pushback, and she said, "Oh, if you try to go for joint custody, I'm going to go ahead and flee the country with the child." And a matter of fact, she did just that, and she fled to Brazil. And he asked, "Hey, I need to find my daughter, and you need to locate her." And then we've already teed it up with the Hague Convention to try to go ahead and get her back. So um, I just knew the city where her family was from, but she was a bit of a prima donna, and so I didn't think she was going to go stay in a hot, air conditioned home in a favela or this and that. And so I was just racking my brain trying to figure out how to find her. And so, just a needle in a haystack, I started to tell investigators, call every hotel in in this city and just ask for her. And I was doing it, other investigators were doing it, and just about ready to give up, and called the one hotel and asked for her, and they said, "Oh yeah, let me connect you." And so I waited a little bit, called back, said, "Oh yeah, she's with a little girl," and just, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, she's with a little girl. They come down for breakfast every morning at 9 o'clock." And so I went and jumped on a plane and went to Brazil. Stayed at that hotel. Didn't know what room she was in. Just staked out the restaurant lobby area, and sure enough, in the morning she came down with her daughter to eat breakfast, and then the games began from there. um, uh, uh, Hiring local investigators to follow them on, motorcycles, because it's so hard to get around, everywhere else. And so, motorcycles up on sidewalks, and, every which way. And so we were um, able to locate her, the daughter, put the paperwork in, and tricked her to come back to the United States to finalize the paperwork that he wouldn't challenge any of the custody. And when she arrived into the United States, they customs grabbed her and took the child and turned it over to the dad. And to this day, he's got full custody.
So it was a happy ending.
So it was a very happy ending, cool story. And it just goes to show you, it just comes down to being tenacious as an investigator and using your imagination and just trying to figure out, and again, never take a no for an answer. So,
I know that wasn't kind of the intention of the story, but there's like a thread between everything that you talk about. Is the beginning of this investigation sounds like it started with, there's always like a full court press. Like, someone hires you, generally they're looking for a fast solution. And instead of one guy doing something, you've got a full network of people to pound the phones and hit every hotel and motel in Brazil. How big of a deal is it to have that network of resources to push on to a problem?
yeah, it's certainly helpful, but the message that I would get out to every investigator out there, I think it's quick to an investigator to say, "Boy, I don't know how to do that," or "I don't think that's possible," or "Let me look on the internet and see if I can find." This is one of those things where it's not going to be in any database, or on Instagram, or what have you. And so, just going and saying, how would I find her if she was my daughter? What would what could I do? Once I got there in Brazil, contacted a local investigator, didn't have any experience with this investigator at all. Said, hey, hey, can you help me out? And oh yeah, I got a FBI federal guy on my side, and pretty much met him in a parking lot for a ham sandwich, and um, he showed me, got phone records, got when they entered the country, um, all of this, all of the movement, when she used her credit cards, all of that. We were able to take all that information and put those pieces together. I want to say I had to pay 2,000 reais. At the time, it was probably 300 US dollars, um, for this information.
Money well spent.
Yeah, exactly. And so it just goes to my point of just never give up, being tenacious, and where there's a will, there's a way.
Boy, you hit something really powerful with what would I do if that were my daughter? And it seems like there's a common thread there where when people call you, they've already done the easy things. Almost any intelligent person can go find an internet database and go creep around on social media. So if that's the solution with some investigators and then they throw their hands up after, that's a big industry problem.
Yeah, you know how many people, and especially women. Oh my God, I helped my girlfriend, find a cheating husband and this and that. And I would make a great investigator, and you should hire me. you
Yeah.
know, all of those things. And so, for our clients coming to us, we try to encourage them. Hey, do what you can do on your own. I assume that you've done what you can, and this is why you're calling me. So, typically the ABCs people try, but they quickly get stuck, and then that's where kind of the resources come in.
How does the budget work out? I know this is really take for granted over simple for you, but if I'm the guy calling you to go find my daughter, how does the financial conversation work? Because you have you have to have the flexibility and ability to make decisions on the road. When you call and find this person, what hotel they might be, that there's going to be something that happens after that. And then you're going to have to find a local investigator and negotiate with that person and find, there's a bunch of if thens and conditions that happen on the road that you cannot foresee when you're talking about the investigation. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of that is just being completely transparent with the client up front, to just say, how long is it going to take? I don't know, until I catch the bad guy, right? And so, preparing them to let them know, hey, this isn't going to be a quick find on the internet. This isn't going to be, some database and hit enter and it spits out the information, right? And so it's about strategizing with them through experience, leaning on that investigative wise. But there's lots of times where I hang up the phone and say, oh shit, how am I going to do this? Right. And so, investigative 101, just, okay, leaning back on your experience, what would you do? How would you do it? And it's a bit of a dance, and you really often, you think about it in your mind of how it's going to play out, and it never plays out the way you think about it in your mind. So you really have to go at it in the sense of, yeah, okay, hey, the end of the game, I'm going to run to this corner. They're going to pass it to me. Nobody's going to be guarding me. I'm going to shoot it. And I'm going to make the three. It just never turns out that way, right? Versus just letting the game come to you, figuring out where's the open spot on the floor, and taking your open opportunity. So, kind of being not only tenacious but an open mind, and just leaning on experience, and just again never taking no for an answer.
Yeah, it seems like perseverance and tenacity come up almost every time we talk, and it's just so easy to run up some billables and then give up because it's hard. H A lot of that conversation, is it I go and send you down there and say, "Brian, do whatever you want," and you say, "I don't know, let's start with X thousand dollars of, time and resources and travel." And then when you get down there, is it, "Okay, I know where she is, but I don't have any other choice but to sit here for however many days that it takes, and then I'm gonna need some extra spend?" Or is it just, I'm going to set a budget, I'm going to hope to stay under that, and if we're making progress, I'm going to call and say, here's a status update. Should I keep going? Is that the dialogue through the investigation?
Yeah, absolutely. Per experience, it's not going to be easy, but you also know via experience that, hey, I just don't know it until I'm in the middle of it. And so I think this original retainer was 15,000 spent, and I think at the end of the day it was 65 or 70, but at the end of the day, if you ask that client, would you mortgage your future to get possession of your daughter? Yeah, yeah, the answer is yes, right? And
Yes.
so, being able to sell that, as an outcome, but you just really don't know until you try. I preach to my investigators all the time. Don't worry about it monetarily. Just be transparent and upfront with the client, keep them updated. And, oftentimes when you're in the middle of it, the client's begging you, please, don't stop. I need you to go. My chips are all in and this is super important to me. So you just keep slaving away until you get the result. And sometimes you can even surprise yourself and do it very quickly. And sometimes, it's drawn out.
I have two questions. I don't even know which I want to ask first, but how big is expectation setting on these initial calls? Because you've obviously had decades of experience and you've learned enough to know you can't predict the future. So when you're going through a call with this that is really emotional for this person, clearly, how big of a part of the discovery and onboarding is expectation setting, in that we may not be able to, this may last for a really long time, here are things that could or could not happen. How big of a picture are you painting for this person on the beginning of this investigation?
Yeah, good question. I try to approach it with the client, and asking as many discovery questions as possible, knowing how hard the task is, setting the expectations, but also letting the client lead the situation. And what is the value of the information for you? And so, if it's something that you think that you can have it done very quickly, and find multi-million-dollar assets in the Cook Islands and in the Bahamas and all of those things, and you're going to go ahead and put the name in, and it's going to spit it out on the other end. Those are the hard conversations you have to have with the client and set those expectations. And I would say for most clients, they don't want to hear, well, maybe I can, maybe I can't. They want an aggressive investigator. They want somebody with confidence and experience that is going to jump in there. And for every investigation, it's like anything. Hey, we're on the 2 yard line. I want the ball. It's a fourth and goal on the two, right? And so you have to go into that with that mindset, and preaching to my investigators that more time you spend in investigation, just the better results you're going to have. So if a client handcuffs you for a handful of hours and wants you to do it in that time, most likely they're going to be disappointed. The relationship isn't going to go well. So it's really important in the beginning, um, to get the train to leave the station, explain it to the client, but then, you know, um, letting the client know, hey, more time to soak, the better opportunity that you're going to have, more rocks we can turn over.
I think that's really crystal clear. It's just outcomes have cost to them, and that's the thing to talk about. That brings up a question. And this happens in almost every industry, B2B, marketing, absolutely. You, throughout the past few decades, have worked with countless, high net worth individuals, celebrities, athletes, CEOs, attorneys, partners. And, through the last time, you've kind of become a high net worth individual and know how people think about money. Growing your business and working with, junior investigators and, even some seniors, how big of a challenge is it to have your lower level members of your team thinking about money in the same way that your clients do? You found people often try and sell around the way they think about money in terms of cutting costs, inexpensive investigations, where the client often doesn't really care about the money that much. They just need the outcome and they don't almost care what it costs to get it. There's this value and outcome based selling, and then there's this cost based selling. How big of a challenge is that for you as a business person?
Yeah, peeling
Long
back.
question.
Peeling back the layers of the onion, really, when it comes down to overall expense, you're absolutely right. There's some clients that the value is tremendous. There's been several clients that have hired me and paid me, six figures plus, that I absolutely looked at it and said, "Hey, I would never spend a dollar on this myself." But as you get into it and you realize, okay, who are you to determine the value of that for that client and how to spend that client's money ultimately, right? And so during COVID, we had a client that was convinced that her husband was, up to no good and seeing escorts and things like that. And I think it was 5, 6 weeks, and she spent $250,000 with us. And each time trying to talk her out of it to say, look, he's 75 years old. He has stage 4 cancer. This and that. It didn't matter to her. They were uber wealthy, and in her mind, it was definitely value added types of stuff to know where he was going and what he was doing. And he really wasn't up to anything nefarious. But, and in my mind, I felt like, well, give the guy some.
Yeah. Let the old man do what he wants.
Sir, he's 75 years old. He built a business for, almost $1 billion. Let the poor guy, live life a little bit before he goes, but ultimately, she was over the moon ecstatic for what we continued to work with her. And, in some respects, we were her therapist more than we were her investigator.
I think that's a really interesting point because we all have things that chew in our minds at night and cost us, sleep and health and happiness. And I guess, like, you're right. Who are we to say what's worth spending money and what it's worth to close a mental tab or find closure? It's our job to listen to requests and do the best job we can to help the customer close something out.
Yeah, and I've been there the 11th hour, and even trying to convince myself that, hey, there's other initiatives to do here. After just working at it and just about ready to give up, in the 11th hour, that one bit of information breaks loose to the point that it blows the lid off. I'll give you a quick example. Doing a large scale scrap investigation that was about $3 million of copper that was missing. So you're not sticking that in your pocket and,
No.
walking out, right? And so it was a massive number. And we worked on the investigation for a very long time. And my Hail Mary was, let's just start going to a bunch of scrap yards and asking to look for their tickets. And I remember it like it was yesterday that, the guy, one of the guys was like, "Hey, we were just about ready to, burn all of these because it's cold in the shop," and literally gave us boxes and boxes of photocopied driver's license with the way ticket. And going through this hour after hour, and one of my investigators complaining as we're sitting in this little cold mechanic shop going through these one after one, and him bitching and moaning of like, "Hey, are we ever going to eat?" And towards the end, just came across bare bright copper. A 19-year-old came in and sold 3,000. 10 minutes later, another pickup truck with another 19-year-old came, and I'm like, "Hey, this can't be just, coincidence." And then we looked at the next day, and there they are again, right before close, selling thousands of dollars of this bare bright copper. And so we drove the 60 miles with the kid's driver's license with the info, and went and knocked on his door and said, "Hey, do you know John Brown, who lives in St. Louis, Missouri?" And he says, "Yeah." And so, he admits to us that, yeah, he would give him a couple $100. He recruited all of his high school buddies with their pickup trucks, and they'd go to this location, load up this copper, and they would sell it day after day after day. And they went to numerous scrap yards to do it. And then that turned into where the mountain of scrap was, and other people involved, and got the FBI involved in a huge federal investigation. And we were able to finally put it all together, and those guys went to prison.
A bunch of dumbass teenagers stole $3 million worth of copper.
No, the teenagers were just recruited by this organized crime ring in order to go, and they didn't know any better, so they were getting paid $100, a couple $100 a pop, to just go in and use their driver's license and sell off the copper. And so they sung like a canary once we got mom and dad involved, and be like, "Hey, here's what Junior's facing here. Okay, you better tell him everything." So.
How often is it that you catch the big bad guy through some unaware, clueless patsy that has just been used?
Um, yeah, 8 out of 10 times.
That does seem to be the thing that all roads point back to, is you use somebody between you and the crime, and that person is often a total moron that tells you everything you need to know as soon as you track them down.
And you do interview after interview, and you'll have people lie to you, and it's just human nature. As an investigator, you have to kind of plow through it, and you have to not let your guard down. And often you still do, because it's human nature and you want to believe them. But as I tell clients, we're paid skeptics, right? And so we audit the auditor, inspect the inspector, and so sorry, I'm going to go ahead and verify what it is that you're telling me. And it's, "Oh boy, this isn't adding up." And then it's just some rando individual that you just think, okay, at the end of the day, "Oh, they're not going to do it. I'll just go through the motions, and I guess I got to do the door knock." And then they're like, "Yeah, here's all the information," and it just puts it together.
God, that's so wild. I can't believe no one's ever offered to involve me in any copper scams. It feels like, what am I doing wrong?
Well, the crazy part about that story is when this guy on the shop floor, massive factory, was caught by a manager sticking gaylords of copper in a roll-off dumpster with the fork truck, and then there was another outside guy that would pick up the dumpster. He pulled a pocket knife on himself, and began to stab him numerous times with this little pocket knife, because he just said, "Oh, my life is over. My life is over." They end up rushing him to the hospital, and then we go and interview him. By that time, the guy's kind of sobered up enough to say, "Hey, yeah, I'm not talking to you, this and that." Yeah, ironically, when they stitched them all up, and did all the x-rays. They found out that the guy had cancer and saved his life. So it's just incredible how some of these work. But that guy was involved with a biker gang, and the biker gang was taking this mountain of copper and selling it off, and funneling and fueling their lifestyle. So it's just, yeah, I could tell you hundreds of stories in the 11th hour where you're just a little dejected and said, boy, I'm not going to get to the bottom of it. And then just one little hanging chit of information that, just breaks it wide open.
I always wonder, what does it feel like? Because, in a past life, I've been to scrap yards, I've done construction work, and that is not a place for high net worth individuals. It is a very seedy, scummy environment.
It is a very seedy, and to top that off, um, it was right on the Missouri River. So we were on in Illinois where we found these scrap yards, but we couldn't for the life of us find a damn scrap yard where they took it over the river into Missouri. Because if they took it over the river into another state, then that brought it in as federal. And so after going and going and going, we found one yard in Missouri where they went across the river and sold it, and that was enough to put it all together and get the feds involved. And when you work with the state, oftentimes they are not as aggressive, don't have the resources. And then even if the guy gets 8 years and, okay, for good behavior, and he got his high school diploma when he was in there, he's out in, 18 months. Whereas on the federal side, you have to serve 85% of the time that you're sentenced. So yeah, it's just always interesting stuff.
Does it feel like with you and an investigator and I don't know how aware you are of how bad, I'm a St. Louis guy. Across the river, I think was famous in like a National Lampoon's movie, like East St. Louis. They cleared the guy's tires off in 5 minutes. You're up to bad stuff if you're going across the river into East St. Louis. When you're there, you're obviously feeling like, geez, this is a nightmare. But when you find the first big ticket in a 19-year-old, and then your pattern recognition alarm starts going off, is like, oh, this stinks like shit. And then you get another and another. What is that feeling like? All of this is worth it.
Oh,
Finally,
as an investigator, there's no better feeling. It's euphoria. It's hitting the grand slam in the bottom of the ninth in the World Series. When you do that, I want to say I had worked on that case for 4 months nonstop on that, and just hitting a dead end everywhere. And then once that opened that up and then got that admission, and then started to do door knocks where they were dropping this copper off, and then interviewing the little old lady across the street and saying, oh yeah, they come with dump trucks every day. And my husband and I were sitting on the porch and we thought that they were going to go ahead and hit the wires and get electrocuted when they would dump this. It was just shiny, like copper looking stuff, right? And then you interview another neighbor who said, yeah, I thought it was really weird. So I went up in my attic and I filmed out the window down on the other side of the fence. Would you like to see the video? And then I took license plates and days and times when they would come. I kid you not, you couldn't write this.
yeah, it's like, did you give her a job application?
Yeah, and she was a waitress at a local diner, and she took all this information down. We got this, and as we interviewed, we found one cousin of the super bad guy who said, "Yeah, I took a bunch of pictures of them hugging one another, arms around each other in front of this mountain of copper, but they made me delete but I still have the card. Do you want it?" We took that card, and the FBI was able to take that that little SD card and recover those photos off of that SD.
God, that's a sweet song there.
Yeah. So it's just crazy on how sometimes it just all comes together.
I want to wrap this with kind of, a partially personal question. What does it feel like to be sitting in, a five-star resort in Thailand, kind of partially vacationing and thinking about what led to this opportunity for you going through a scrapyard, one of the shittiest things you could do in the shittiest city in the entire United States by crime stats, I think. How do you look back at all of this stuff that got you here?
Yeah, I reflect from time to time, and starting my business with cash advances from credit cards, um, and having a little tiny office in the Chamber of Commerce building and touch and go, and wondering if you were going to make it, and just the haters of saying, "Hey, you didn't know what you were doing," and a lot of that was true at the time, but just looking back and persevering and all of those sacrifices, to where if you're truly a good investigator, you love it, you enjoy it. You're in it for the hunt. You're hunting the number one predator, which is man, and to be able to just be, smarter and put it together and solve it is very rewarding. And so so when I ultimately hang it up, it'll be a sad day, and maybe I'll never hang it up. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a little worried for you. I think you have in the best way. I think you've got the sickness.
Yeah. Again, it's like a bad gambler, right? It's you're living for that next moment, on the roulette wheel, and
Hmm.
so you just go through and you grind, and then you live for those moments that we talked about now.
Yeah, I guess like you have had some of the highest highs professionally because the highest highs come from the lowest lows. And again, there's not a lot lower than dusting through some scrapyard receipts for
Uh,
hours and days.
well, I know I never told you this, but it was East St. Louis, of all places there, which is rough, and then just over the river in Alton, Illinois. So
Mm.
if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I know where the bad boys play. I'm a good boy now.
I
Um,
can't picture you working in a scrapyard. Sorry, Scott.
I have a core memory. My dad was, a union carpenter, and we did a lot of kind of side projects like house flips and stuff. And when I was 16, he sent me to, I remember, shout out Vince Jack's scrapyard in St. Louis, Missouri. And I went there. I didn't know how a scale worked. Just a loaded, beat up truck. I was 4'10" probably, and the guy working the booth read me down some of the most colorful, inappropriate language to where I was like driving home crying. Just like, so I have been, but they saw me for what I was. I was not a
Well,
scrap
just
daddy.
remember, Tony Soprano was in the trash and the scrap business. So,
Sanitation. Um, well, I'll leave you with that. I don't need to give you any more therapy sessions about my dad looking at me as a scrapper. Get back to it. Enjoy yourself. Try not to work too much while you're in Thailand because there'll be plenty waiting for you when you get back.
uh, yeah, I'm a bit wrecked with the 12-hour difference. My body clock's still not on there, so I'm walking around pacing the hotel at about 4 in the morning, ready to tear it up and go do it. So by the time that I get on the clock, I'll be flying back and doing it
Yeah.
all
So
over
it's about it's 9 p.m. where you are now. Are you like getting ready to try to go to sleep or are you about to hit the town? Where's your
again.
sleep clock at?
Oh, no, my wife is long passed out, but I will try to figure out, something to do, because just mentally, if it's before midnight, I can't go. So,
Something tells me you'll be resourceful enough to find something to do. Well, I'll let you after it. Brian, again, had a blast. Excited to talk next time.
all right. Hey, thanks. We'll see you on the other side.
Behave yourself.
Thanks. We'll see you, buddy.
Uh,